Hello, guys. Good afternoon. So, while you guys are here in biology, the Horticulture Club is up in Raleigh having a great time. Yep. Okay, so today we're going to talk about webs of life. Just how everything is interconnected. In the first part, we have to talk about our producers and consumers. This shouldn't take that much time. Producers are the things that manufacture energy, or not energy per se, but really compounds that contain energy in an ecosystem. So essentially plants. We can expand that to include other things that garner energy from the abiotic parts of the ecosystem, such as chromists or algae, or even if we're talking about like a thermal vent in the ocean, we can talk about the chemosynthetic organisms that take energy, create those chemical compounds that store energy through heat or any other type of chemical process. But at the end of the day, producers manufacture food instead of obtaining it by eating another organism. They're also called autotrophs, which we talked about in the first week of class. So if you think about the African savanna, just as an example of an ecosystem, the grasses and trees are the producers, and they form the basis of the biotic community. So if we didn't have plants, or at least algae, then the ecosystem, including us, would not be able to survive. So the other types of organisms that we have are consumers. These are the organisms that consume the producers or consume other consumers. They can't produce anything for themselves. They can't produce those biocompounds through garnering energy from the abiotic part of the biome. They're also called heterotrophs, and we got a few different types of consumers. So the first type of consumer would be an herbivore. They are things that only eat plants or algae. So you can think of a cow. So a cow's not an autotroph, even though it doesn't consume another animal. We're talking about consuming other organisms in any sense. So a cow would be a consumer. Now, a carnivore are animals that get their food from other animals. So we would not be a carnivore. Hopefully not. A lion would be a carnivore. Cats cannot get their nutrition from plants. There's just vitamins that if a lion chose to go vegan, they would die because there are vitamins that they can't get. And because vitamins are so important to your nutrition, they are essentially enzymes. They're enzymes, they're catalysts that help bodily processes function. They don't necessarily provide any structural basis for the animal, but they make sure that things get done inside of the animal. If the lion did not eat meat, then they would die. So that would be an example of a carnivore. And then we are omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. Now, within consumers, there's different types of those consumers that we can define besides just herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. We have predators, that would be like the lion, animals that hunt other animals. We have prey, animals that are being hunted. Scavengers, which clean up the dead corpse after the predator has already killed it. So, for example, this might be a hyena. So a lion makes a kill, but then a hyena comes in after the lions are finished eating and kind of finishes up the job. A vulture would be considered a scavenger because they wait for animals to die and then just swoop down in and eat. And then finally, we have decomposers, which are also known as detritivores. These are like bacteria. These are organisms that break down nutrients from detritus to waste products of animals and plants. So this could be like bacteria or fungus cleaning up what the scavengers left behind of an animal. It could also be dung beetles taking manure and rolling it and consuming that. It could be fungus breaking down plant matter that has fallen down from a dead tree, stuff like that. Anything inside of a log that is breaking down that log to turn it into hummus would be considered a detritivore. You know, the hummus like you buy in the grocery store? Yeah. Okay, so giraffes in the African savanna. These would be the herbivores. They graze from the trees. Lions, leopards, and cheetahs, the carnivores and predators, that eat the giraffes as well as the impalas, guinea fowl, and gazelles. Poor guinea fowl, they're so pretty. Jackals, the omnivores, eat both rabbits and apricots. The impalas, guinea fowl, and gazelles are prey. Vultures and hyenas eating the remains of the impalas, guinea fowl, and gazelles are scavengers. And termites, they are the decomposers. They feed on dead plants, wood, and animal dung. Competition. So this is when organisms try to use the same resource. So you could think of, say, a lion killing a zebra. Well, maybe a cheetah wanted to eat that zebra, or maybe a leopard. And then once the animal is actually killed, then a hyena wants part of the zebra, a vulture wants part of the zebra, so the lion can never choose to share, which it's not going to do willingly. It might give it some scraps. But if the lions kill too many zebras or eat too much of a carcass, then the vultures and the hyenas are left out, and then some of those hyenas or vultures might die of starvation because they can't get anything. So that idea is called competition. Now inside of the competition we have two ideas. One is simple and one is complex. A food chain is energy in a biome passing from one organism to another in a sequence. So it goes essentially sunlight, autotroph, which are plants, then an herbivore. In this African example, it would be the zebra, and then a carnivore, which would be the lion. And lions are at the top of the food chain, right? That doesn't necessarily explain everything. It's a model, like we've talked about the first week of class, but the model is incomplete. Because what happens to the lion? Just because it's at the top of the food chain doesn't mean nothing happens to it. So either the lion will get killed by something. Let's say a lion accidentally steps too close to an elephant and the elephant gets mad and kills the lion. Well, that lion's going to break down. And what's going to break it down? It's going to be bacteria and fungus, everything like that. So where do we put the bacteria and fungus on a food chain? It's kind of hard to, right? So this is why we came up with the idea of a food web. So this is a bunch of essentially hyperlinks. They are lines going from one organism to another, explaining how they interact with each other in terms of energy consumption. So it can be fairly complex as you want to make it. If you think about the African savanna, yes, you have the lion, the hyena, and the vulture, and they're pretty much on the top of the food pyramid, the food chain. Well, then you have all of those three connected to the different strains of bacteria, the different strains of fungi, which will eventually break them down. You also have them connected to all of the multiplicity of species that they're going to eat. And then when you have all those multiplicity of species that they eat, such as impalas and gazelles and zebras and all that good stuff, you have those connected to all of the plant species that they will eat. And then once you have all the plant species that they eat, so like baobab trees or whatever type of grass that's in the African savanna, those are connected to the fungi that feed them in the soil. So we talked about this in horticulture. There's mycorrhizal fungi, and they essentially act as extensions of the plant's roots to gain nutrition for the plant. And these can be the exact same fungi that break down the lion, the dead corpse, after it dies. So then it all comes back in a circle. It's a circle of life. Yeah, like that. Right? So just like the Lion King. Not actually. Take out the reincarnation. Okay, so ecological pyramid is similar to a food chain, but it has some math involved. It's a way to demonstrate the flow of energy in which each layer represents a different type of organism in the food chain. Each layer is called a trophic level, if you think back to autotroph and heterotroph. Producers are on the bottom and are typically the largest. Herbivores are in the middle and carnivores on top. Each trophic level represents the amount of living matter, and this is quantified by how much mass that thing contains, that trophic level contains. The healthier an ecosystem, the more biomass it supports, so the more stuff you can have. And biomass is more objective than just numbering species, because if you just number species or number the amounts, you can have millions of bacteria, but they barely make up any mass. But then you can have a few hundred zebras, and they're going to make up a ton of mass in that ecosystem, or like a few scores of elephants, then they'll make up a ton of mass in that ecosystem. So either way, though, the food pyramid does tend to get smaller as you go from one trophic level to the next. And again, it's similar to a food chain. It's just the difference is you can actually quantify stuff in the food pyramid. Still has all the disadvantages in terms of a model as the food web, but it's a little bit better than a food chain. Okay, symbiosis. This is when animals interact with their habitat and with each other. First type of symbiosis we have is neutralism, and that's when neither organisms interact with each other. They just exist in the same habitat. They never talk to each other. So you can think about this in your class. Let's see. I'm trying to think of two people that have never talked ever before in this class. I don't know. Let's just say Mariah and Bryson. They're on two opposite sides of the classroom. They don't really interact much. So that is neutralism. They don't hurt each other. They don't help each other. They just coexist. In nature, going back to the example of the African savanna, we can think of black mambas and oxpeckers. That's a type of bird. They live on the savanna, but they're not going to interact. Birds are up in the tree, and the black mamba is doing its thing in the ground. The next type of symbiosis we can talk about is mutualism. And we saw this with the bird and the rhino a few days back on Monday when I had its picture up front. Let's see, in a class example, it might be Max needs help on a geometry problem, and Caleb steps in to help. Well, actually, no, because Caleb's not getting any help himself. So let's say Max says, okay, if you help me out in geometry, I'll help you out in learning basketball. That won't work either, but let's just say for the sake of example, they make that agreement. If Max actually was good at basketball, then that could be mutualistic. So the next type of symbiosis we have is parasitism. These are organisms that depend on a much larger animal, called a host, for food. So this is when one animal benefits and the other animal is hurt, actually harmed by the interaction. So you can think of a tapeworm. They get food, they get literally all their life is just spent taking nutrients from another thing, and then they die. And the other animal has their nutrients sucked from them. You could think like someone getting help in the class, but then not reciprocating that help. Stuff like that. Okay, so next type of symbiosis is commensalism. This is when one organism is helped and the other organism is unaffected. So rhinoceroses stir up insects when walking across the savannah, and egrets can get them easier afterwards. So one side doesn't even realize what's going on, the other side is helped. And then finally there's amensalism, when one organism is hurt and the other is unaffected. So this is a little bit harder to think of because it's just like one organism accidentally ends up doing something that ends up causing the death of another. It could be thought of like an elephant accidentally stepping on a bird. That would be amensalism. Another example would be herbivores becoming startled by a black mamba and alerting a mongoose to its location. So then the mongoose whose prey is the black mamba, because the venom doesn't really work on them, they eat the mamba because now they know where it is. Right? Mimicry, the last thing we're going to talk about. This is when animals look like another type of animal to accomplish some task. So, for instance, there's two types of snake in North Carolina that look very similar. One's called the king snake, the other's called the coral snake. Can't remember which one is poisonous, but essentially the rhyme is, the king snake is poisonous. Venomous. The rhyme goes, black on yellow, kill a fellow, red on black, venom lack. So that's how you can distinguish between the two, but they look very similar. Geckos can attempt to look like leaves, different insects look like leaves. There's butterflies that attempt to make themselves look like monarchs because the monarch butterfly eats, what is it called? The name of the plant is escaping me, but it's a plant that makes them taste extremely bitter, so animals don't like to eat it. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, wait, that's not the last thing. I have one more thing to talk about. And this one more thing is aposematism. And no, it is not the act of being a possum. It is warning coloration. So you can think of poison dart frogs. Or actually the monarch butterfly, going back to that example, it's bright yellow or bright orange so that it can tell would-be predators that, hey, you don't want to eat me. I taste really bad. It might end up killing you. Cuttlefish are brightly colored to show that they're poisonous to eat. Okay, so that is aposematism. With that, I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.